here we go. Could you guys turn that fan off? It creates a lot of noise for that microphone.
How do I do that?
You just pull it until it stops. That might be right.
Wait, did you pipe this? Why did you set this up?
No, Lakatos helped me get it going yesterday because I was videoing the lower level stuff for a while, and then he saw what we were trying to do and he helped us do it better. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So I don't know if this is true, and I will tell you if I make things up, if it's just me, or if I'm telling you something that I'm not sure of. I won't. If I tell you something, it means it comes from something. Okay, I don't make stuff up and then tell you that that's history. I don't do that. Okay, so this guy, I think what he did was he worked with some really successful people like Oprah Winfrey. You with me?
Yeah.
Josh? You guys with me? I think what he did was, I think he like tested her DNA, and the DNA test gave her this whole family history. You know, it was like root, boom, out of the lab. And I have no idea how much that costs. I don't even know if that's really possible, but that's my understanding. But if it were a reasonable cost, wouldn't it be wicked cool if we were the first ones in the school to do it, and then it kind of spread? That would just be so cool. And my guess is, if you were a ninth grader and you're studying, what is it, world civilization?
Yeah.
World civilization, you know, how much of the time do you not identify with what you're studying?
A lot.
But imagine if you had your family laid back through some of that time.
Sweet.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Suddenly get interested.
So it'd be like, he knew that guy.
Yeah. So, or where my ancestors were like, you know, farming peat in some Scottish island or something. You know, the Romans were heading toward their backyard. Wouldn't that be cool? It'd be so cool. All right, so idea born here with us. We got don't let it leak. And we'll see what we can do. I think if we produced some really good videos, and today, I think I would be super comfortable reaching out to this guy and seeing if he could help us.
Yes.
And it might just be a pipe dream. I have no idea. But here's I think didn't we read that he's a Harvard? He works at Harvard.
Professor's occupation.
Yeah, he's a professor at Harvard University. I think he's got it in, was this an endowed chair? I'm not sure. In any case, super interesting guy, incredible credentials, awesome position.
Wait, can I see the name Duco?
Huh? Yeah, you did, yeah.
You will have an eye out.
Okay, look.
That is.
After getting tenure, after being denied tenure at Yale, he got it at Cornell, or he went to Cornell,
Yeah,
and
Dookie.
Harvard.
Yuki.
Wait.
You know, so kind of interesting. So now, here, can I tell you the story and then we'll see if it's true?
Yeah.
Because my story could be better than what's true, so I'll just tell you the story and tell you it's not necessarily true. Okay? Here's what I think happened. He was going home one night in Cambridge, and he forgot his key. So he was in the process of climbing over the back porch to get into the window to get into his house, and the cops stopped him. Didn't believe that it was his house.
That happened
And
with my
arrested
dad.
him. And I guess that was probably the wrong guy to get that one wrong with.
Yeah.
I hope he busted him bad. Let's see, now that's my story, so let's see if there's any truth to it. On July 16, 2009, Harvard University professor Henry Luce was arrested at his Cambridge, Massachusetts home by a local police officer responding to a 911 black guy going over the fence. Go get it! Report of men breaking and entering the residence.
The arrest initiated a series of events that unfolded under the spotlight of the international news media. The arrest occurred just after Gates returned home to Cambridge after a trip to China to research the ancestry of Yo-Yo Ma, oh baby. You know who Yo-Yo Ma is, right?
Isn't he yeah.
Yeah, classical. Yeah. Gates found the front door to his home gym shut, and with the help of his driver, tried to force it open. A local witness reported their activity to the police as a potential burglary. You can't hate the person for that, right? They're looking out for their neighbor. There's nothing wrong with that. Accounts regarding the ensuing confrontation differ, but Gates was arrested by the responding officer and charged with disorderly conduct. On July 21, the charges against Gates were dropped, I bet. The arrest generated a national debate about whether or not it represented an example of racial profiling by police. My guess is the cops came and checked it out, and he said it was my house, and maybe the cops kept checking things out, and he mouthed off to him. I would, wouldn't you? But that doesn't work real well with don't mouth off to cops. It's a really bad idea.
Profiling is wrong.
Alright, you want me to tell me?
After beer Sunday.
So, my story wasn't that far off. Okay, cool. So let me keep on top of that a little bit.
Where did you use the word rap shit?
What?
It says to rap shit down.
Okay, so we're past 4, right? Class number 4. What's today?
28, 9.
0, 8,
I was gonna worry your dad.
2, 9, 13. No. Yeah. Okay. So help me again. What did we do? What did we talk about?
The last class, we reviewed the document.
Review. We did the docs. Did you guys? Are you comfortable with the idea that you can read those documents and find that he's greedy, and then you can look at him again and find that maybe he's desperate? Did we make that point okay?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I think we're done with that. So we review the docs. Greedy to desperate. And listen, in the other class I talked about the learning logs. I don't remember what I told you about. But what is the difference? This is a good question. What's the difference between what makes the difference between reading those documents and concluding that Columbus is greedy and exploitive, and reading those documents and concluding that he may be exploitive, but he's desperate? What's the difference? What makes the difference? Yeah.
I think you're looking at it in terms of like judging him and having a predetermined opinion that he was doing wrong, and then it's a lot harder to see that possibly he was just desperate. Whereas if you kind of work open-minded about it, you can more easily consider other options.
Yeah. Do you guys know what the earliest histories were designed to do? Old stories, old histories. If you were reading ancient Greek history, what was its purpose? Tell your kids the story about this big battle where you were completely outnumbered and you won anyway. What was the point of that story?
That you have become obstacles.
To teach them that kind of stuff. Okay? It was to teach lessons.
it wasn't necessarily to illuminate truth. Often there was a moral kind of component to it. And in modern history, which really gets launched in about not until really the late 19th century, honestly, I think I'm gonna go out on a limb here a little bit, but guess what most of the American history up until World War I tended to do? What was its flavor? I mean, let me give you in 1776, if you read a whole bunch of American histories, what were they all kind of doing? In 1876, sorry. You read this history of the American Revolution in 1876, and what are they saying about it?
Well, we don't know.
Yeah, well, gosh, we overcame obstacles, and
Everything was great and all that stuff, right? And the founding fathers did it to establish freedom, and can you imagine? In a nutshell, I'm going to argue that a lot of those histories tended to be very celebratory, very positive, very complimentary, and they made us look good. And I will tell you that after World War I, and in the 1920s, some historians came along after seeing the horrors of World War I and seeing the conditions produced by industrialism with a lot of haves and have-nots. Historians started saying, I'm not buying it, and they started criticizing those early histories. Guess what the flavor of those tended to be? Huh? A little bitter. All of a sudden the founding fathers weren't these forces necessarily of liberty and democracy and all that, but the revolution and the new constitution was a way for the old colonial elite to establish and maintain its supremacy. Really different point of view, right?
Yep.
And honestly, and I'm not making this up, I'm generalizing it, way oversimplifying, but I'm not making it up. It comes from a book called, you don't need to know this right now, maybe later, but it comes from a guy named Combs, C-O-M-B-S, and the name of the book, I'm pretty sure, is Nationalist Radical Realist. And he's sort of surveying, he's writing about the history of history. Does anybody know what we call the study of history? The history of history? You ever heard the word historiography?
Yes.
Historiography, the study of history. Right? But now listen to this. So you kind of have this little bit of a flavor of good and bad. And in the 1950s, after World War II, there was another kind of school of historical thought. The historians they were saying, stop talking about good and bad and tell me about the national interest. Okay? We didn't drop the bomb because Nagasaki and Hiroshima because we're good. We didn't drop the bomb because we were bad. We dropped the bomb because it was in the national interest or not to do so. Okay? And what it did was it was an invitation to take the moralistic flavor out of American history. Okay? I think we still approach a lot of our assessments of literature and history in school with this flavor of good and bad. And I think it's old-fashioned. I don't think you cheat because you're bad. I think you cheat because you feel huge pressure. You don't, there are real live reasons. I'm not condoning it. But that's another thing for you to know. Sometimes if you understand the cause and effect relationships that lead to a bad behavior, or to
to a bad behavior. See how it's in our language? It's in our language. But so often if you reveal that you understand what causes that kind of behavior, people think that means you condone it. I completely understand why people punch their kids. I completely get it. It doesn't mean I condone it. Okay? And you know, my wife works at Children's Medical Center, and you can't believe how many infants and 3-year-olds get punched by men. Or shaken or something. But if I think of some of those lives and what they're dealing with, and the lack of equipment for dealing with a child, I mean, I got a lot of education, I had a really good family, never had any physical abuse or anything like that. And let me tell you, there were a couple times, man, when I wanted to wring my kid's neck, just shut up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, I didn't do that. I didn't feel that way. I never did it. But it was interesting to watch it come up. You know, it was like I would never do that. That's not my impulse, and it would die really fast. But the idea is, oh, that's what happens. Okay. So my feeling would be, if you really care about little kids getting punched by their dads, then get them some better tools, talk about the conditions, let them know that it's normal. They can anticipate a couple nights where they just want the kid to be quiet, and the kid's not going to be quiet. You know, you got to school people. Does that make sense? So you'll notice now what makes the difference between greedy and desperate?
Greed's for like more like you don't need it so much. Desperate's kind of like it's a necessity.
Oh, that's interesting. But I mean reading those documents and concluding that he's desperate versus concluding he's greedy. What makes the difference?
Maybe if you knew the person's motives and the reason for it, then you could get more of an understanding of why. But like, if you don't understand his motive, then it's kind of hard. You have to go off your own opinion of it.
What does it take to think about the motive? I am leading you too much. You can't get this. The difference is you and what you bring to the document. If you bring a sort of moral sensibility where you've broken the whole world down into good and bad, then you're going to say, what about him? He's a greedy guy. This bad guy, oh my God, I thought he was the hero. Oh, you have his effect. But if you bring more refined sensibilities and you kind of look, wait, let's just check this out a little bit. Now he's writing to the king, Your Majesty and Your Highness, and he's obviously lying, frankly, because he's saying the rivers and the mountains are filled with gold and all that stuff, and they're not. So what's wrong? He's trying to create a list of things of value to get his next trip funded. If you don't bring that curiosity, if you don't bring that careful analysis, if you just bring your sort of third-grade moralism, I don't mean to be insulting there, but to third graders, but I just don't kind of find a way to say it. You know how everything's good, bad, sort of, when you're little? Don't do that. Does that make sense? And if you got, and this is the kind of thing I'd like to see showing up in your learning log a lot, is if you get what I'm saying right now about how important what you bring to the table is. Because if you go out and tell the world that Columbus was a greedy bastard, that is very different than going out in the world and saying this guy was desperate to serve the interests of a nation state so he could keep a job. That is a hugely different message to spread around the world. Okay? And if you get that, then you will understand why we did this for a whole day. Remember how I kept saying you matter? This is a history class, and you do. You know? I can look at somebody in this room and I can say, he's a lax bro. And I can leave it at that. And some people do, don't they? They leave people they remain content with assessments of people that are based on 3 qualities, with no curiosity about more than that. Or they love the idea of hypocrites. Everywhere they look, they see hypocrites. So Thomas Jefferson talked about all men being equal, and then what's he do? Keep slaves. And they don't have another question. They just say he's a hypocrite. And what I'm saying is, with some careful analysis, with some human understanding, you can actually find that not only was he not a hypocrite, he actually wasn't a man with a distance, a gap between his ideals and his practices. There's actually a way to preserve the integrity of both those apparently contradictory things in one life. And we'll go through that one. But can you imagine somebody just calling him a hypocrite? Because that's their readily available concept, right? It's like fairness. I just gave you the fairness thing, right? Did I tell you the fairness story?
About someone being late.
Yeah, about someone being late. You know, if your concept of fairness is treating everybody the same, then I was unfair. If you see somebody who says one thing and does another, you call them a hypocrite. But there's another way to look at it. So you guys, and what you bring to the table makes all the difference. Okay? So, that's really important. Okay, so we did that. What else we did?
We also watched the video.
That was basically it.
Is that it?
We discussed Henry Lewis to the end of the time.
Okay, we did. Okay, cool. Let's see. What do I want to do? 2 things I want to do. I'm not sure which one I want to. But again, I got a feeling. Let me give you your. Oh, what I did. Maybe I told you this. I worked with Lakatos on different ways to collaborate, to organize collaborative experience. Did I tell you about that? Okay, you know how we have our learning logs? I'm keeping this. You have a learning log. Lakatos sent me. I don't remember which one it is. Lakatos sent me this thing. Check this out. Ways to use Google Docs.
Yeah.
There's a group of professionals out there talking about how they're using this. Lakatos thinks we should submit our learning logs as one way to use them. So that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Remember we talked about kind of reaching out beyond the classroom?
Yeah.
So I like that a lot. But I didn't know how to manage all your logs and all that stuff, and I figured that out, how I'm going to do it. So I got to set up those folders, and I'll have to share them with those folders, and blah, 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 and we'll get to all that.